Hello and welcome to part 5 of my home gym and climbing wall build. In this video we'll be seeing the finishing of the roof and the insulation for the roof and the walls as well. Now unfortunately I didn't have any video of putting the OSB boards on, however I did take some photographs and I did have some help doing them as well. Now the rubber membrane on the other hand was another matter. It was very heavy, it was about 150-200 kilos. And so again, I had to create an A-frame and a winch mechanism to try and get it up on the roof, to the point where it took actually two of us to actually winch it up on the roof. But once it was on there, we were able to unroll it and lay it all out. We didn't glue it at this point, we just left it to hang, but we did have a specific glue. I did buy a kit, and it came with some different buckets of contact adhesive and general adhesive for this membrane as well. Now once we put this on, I did leave it for a day or two before actually gluing it, and I then moved on to insulating the roof. Now this particular roof, we decided to do a cold roof design. Normally there are two types of roof designs that you can do. You can do a warm roof or a cold roof. A warm roof generally requires insulation to be laid on top of your roof deck, and then a second roof deck placed on top of the insulation. That normally then means that the roof structure is quite large because the insulation actually goes on top of the roofing joists and then the roofing deck. I wanted to try and minimise that and make sure that I was utilising the most space inside. So I went for a cold roof design, and that means putting the insulation between the roof joists. You have to include a 50mm air gap with a cold roof, and that allows cross ventilation to flow from the back to the front, in my case, to make sure that no moisture builds up in that cavity and no condensation is likely to occur. Now when I bought the sound insulation, which is the insulation I was using for the outside of the walls and for the topmost section of the roof, I actually discovered that I was a couple of packs short, and when I looked online for any local suppliers for this particular rock wall insulation, I couldn't actually find any. The stuff I had bought was high density rock wall sound insulation. I could only find medium density. So I had to make up my mind where I was going to use what bits of insulation. So I decided the walls were the most important, so that was where the high density insulation was going to be put. So I stopped doing the roof and decided I'm going to do the walls instead. Make sure you use that up first, and then any leftovers I can use the medium density stuff. So that's why I started doing the walls. This is quite a good example of how this double timber frame system works. You can see putting the sound insulation between the external studs of the frame, which meant that they were offset to the internal frame, which provides a little bit more, or less thermal bridging, more thermal insulation there as well. It also means I can use the full depth of the wall for the insulation. Now, generally with putting insulation in any sort of breathable building, you want to make sure that you put your most breathable elements on the outside and the least breathable elements on the inside. So normally you put a vapor barrier or such like up on the inside to try and prevent any moisture getting through, but if there were, then anything that does get through is able to migrate its way to the outer skin. Now as far as the roof was concerned, because I had to make sure there was a 50mm air gap, I decided that I was going to cut some of the membrane fabric that I was using for the outside of the building and staple it to the inside of the roofing joists to make sure that when I pushed the insulation up that it wouldn't close that 50mm gap. The noggins you see in the roof there are 150mm and the joists were 225mm. So it meant that if I used the noggins as a reference point, I would make sure that I would have in excess of 50mm as an air gap. So what you see here is myself putting the membranes up in the roof and stapling them all into place. I did make sure that at the ends of the roofs I was making sure that there was enough space to be able to push the insulation over the walls to make a complete envelope to stop any cold spots appearing. So I was using 100mm of PIR insulation for the insides and 50mm of sound insulation for the outsides of the board. This meant that I was able to far exceed what the building codes are in my area, which only require 120mm of insulation. My vapor control layer was also multifoil. I decided against using the polythene vapor barriers and decided that an extra bit of insulation to reflect the infrared heat would probably be a better choice for me. I wanted a really super efficient room that I could heat with very little energy, and in fact I only use a 900 watt infrared panel heater and it heats this whole room perfectly adequately. So I really felt this worked very, very well. These couple of videos were taken over 2 or 3 days. There was an awful lot of work going up and down the ladders. Probably I might have done things a little differently, but this is, I didn't have it written down on paper exactly what I was going to do. I was kind of going along and almost making it up on the fly. I had a vision in my head of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't entirely sure of how to get there. So I was kind of researching as I went along, not having done anything quite like this before, trying to find solutions to problems that I'd encountered. And so it took a little bit longer than I was necessarily anticipating. Even things like putting the sound insulation up, I was half expecting it to be quite rigid, although it is rock wool and it's quite dense and it feels very rigid. Actually, when it's hanging from the ceiling, it would always droop and sometimes it would fold and slide out. So I had to figure out, okay, well, how am I going to keep it in place? So I decided to just cut little bits of fabric to sort of strap them in, and then the membrane at the top prevented them being pushed too high, and that seemed to work quite well in this situation here. It took a long time to put them all up. I had to trim them ever so slightly, even though I made the roof joists 2-foot spans. That was from the centre point, and because I'd used 75mm thick joists, the rock wool didn't quite fit in. It was about an inch or two, or 50mm just too big, so I had to keep trimming off a little bit just to get them to squeeze in. So again, like little bits of extra time it took to put them in. So they're just little attention to details that I had to just try and do and figure out, and that obviously just takes a lot of time. Now, we don't actually see the PIR insulation putting in this video. This is just purely the sound insulation. The insulation itself I got in bulk online. I just found the cheapest supplier. The PIR insulation I got as Seconds. There is a website called Seconds Co., which I discovered from watching videos from the Restoration Couple, and they sell pallets of Seconds, so manufactured with either slight defects or slight inaccurate tolerances to thickness or width or anything like that, and they sell them for about half the price of what they would go for normally. So I was able to buy 2 pallets of the stuff, and I think I used about 1.5 pallets of insulation. The rest I actually sold on Facebook Marketplace, and loads of people wanted the stuff, and it went within a day or two. And even with this here, the sound insulation, because I was trimming it all and trimming it down, I was actually ended up with about one whole pack's worth of sound insulation left over. Unfortunately, no one really wants offcuts of sound insulation, so they had to be taken to the skip. In any case, like and subscribe to keep up to date with what's going on, and do watch my previous videos and any upcoming. Thanks for watching. Bye.